New Age history lesson. Tarot didn't come from Egypt? Really? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and germs, welcome to a New Age history lesson. Today we're going to be talking about the origination of tarot. When you have people talk about the tarot, they always say it either definitely came from Egypt or it definitely didn't come from Egypt. It came from the mystery schools of the great Egyptian magicians, or it came from some people that got together and made the tarot. We're going to get into all that. It's, as with everything, it's a little more convoluted than we would like it to be. You always have the people, typically it's either the winners or what people want history to be that defines the storyline that we then accept, right? So it's a little more convoluted, and I just want to go ahead and get into that. First, I do want to talk about, I'm going to be making another YouTube channel. And that YouTube channel is going to be specifically for the talismans and magical goodies that I make. I reset all my cameras so that I could get my new thing that I made for myself on camera, and it didn't work. So, look at that guy. Ain't she purty? That's my mail-on that I made for myself. I hammered it out in the archaic style, and I think it looks really badass. So if you want to check that out in a couple weeks, I'm going to put that video up along with a couple others. Maybe check it out. The Dancing Pair, stuff that I'm putting up on my Etsy shop, the Dancing Pair shop. So check it out. So now on to the tarot. In 1367, playing cards came to Europe. They first hit over in Italy and France and those countries that were along the coast because they were along the trading routes that came out of Egypt. Right. Playing cards hit the New World from Egypt. This consisted of 52 cards with 3 court cards and 4 suits, which were cups, coins, sticks, and swords. Sound familiar? It wasn't until 1440 that we have the tarot being created, and it became the tarot with the addition of the Trion Fee. The Trion Fee, or trump as we would call it in English, is what has now become known as the major arcana. Now, when this was created, it was created with astrological symbols and mystical, magical, elemental symbols and all kinds of imagery that we would know today as magical built into the tarot game. Now, we don't have an actual divinatory system set up until the early 18th century, officially. That's when we first have written record of a divinatory system that was built around the tarot cards. In 1789, Ettiella, Etteilla, was the company that first printed a tarot deck that was specifically made for occult or divinatory purposes. And then in 1909 is when we have the most famous deck of all time being created. That's when the Rider-Waite deck was painted by Pamela Colman Smith. I got her name right the first try. Pamela Colman Smith painted the Rider-Waite deck for A.E. Waite. She received like a really small amount of money and got a flat rate. So when the Rider-Waite deck eventually took off, which was almost instantly, she didn't get any extra money. We know that the Rider-Waite Smith deck, as we now know it, because we have added Smith to the end of it because we're not terrible people, as it came out, very soon after, there were a whole bunch of copies made of it. There were basically plagiarizations that came out within a couple years of it hitting the market. So we know that it was like a huge deal. Pamela Colman Smith, although she is credited with the imagery and she is credited as being a seer of sorts, we now know from other renditions of the tarot deck around that time or before or in museums at the time, it was mostly copies. It was her version of cards that had already existed in the tarot canon previous to her making the deck. So a lot of mystical, magical insight is given to her. However, a lot of it was just her ability to paint that made that deck so incredible. Now on to the Egyptian stuff. So tarot was created well after things had left Egypt and come to the New World, and it was widely known that it is an Italian creation and it was a playing card game used for gambling and fun times and whatever else. So tarot directly did not come from Egypt. However, playing cards did come from Egypt, did come to us from Egypt. Playing cards were actually created in the 11th century in China. Now, soon after they were created, they spread like wildfire. These were all hand-painted cards. I mean, it was a few hundred years before we had a printing press. So everything was handmade. They were very expensive. Even once they got into Europe, usually playing cards were something that was owned by like aristocrats and stuff because it was so difficult to produce all of these playing cards. Common folk just didn't have access to them. In the East, typically people who were of the spiritual hierarchy, of the spiritual caste, were more wealthy people and they had access to things like this. As everyone knows, Egypt has a very rich history of magic. It's called Heka, which really just means magic, but Egyptian magic is called Heka, Heka. They also have a very rich history of divination, of telling the future and finding out from the gods what they should be doing. I heard some really interesting stuff as I was researching all the different kinds of divination. Most of it seemed to be like versions of scrying, whether it be in the sand, whether it be reading tea, that kind of stuff. But they would do it typically early in the morning or very late at night because that was said to be when magic powers were at their strongest. And if they didn't get the answer, the article read from the Egyptologist, if the answers were not forthcoming, then the magician would threaten the gods with a lamp. So that sounds like a lot of fun. I like that divination. If you don't get the answer, you just start. I like it. So here's where I do some of my inferring, which is not historical. It may not be accurate, but it only makes sense to me. Everybody that I've known that does divination, if you are specifically into divination itself, you're not following a certain tradition necessarily, you're not doing anything like real specific. Like in Bond, we have like you learn these things in this order and you get to this point. If you're just into divination, you divine with everything. You find any way you can tell the future with anything that you can find, and that's how you build your skills. When I first got into divination, I mean, it was the pendulum, it was the tarot, it was the cartomancy, it was anything scrying, anything I could find, I was trying to tell the future with or communicate with the gods and the demons, and now I have a whole library of stuff that I can use at any point. So it's bizarre to me that you would have a culture that is so closely tied to magic. And in the desert, they have their own beings that live out there. It's a whole different brand of these powerful, fiery, angry, and wonderful, mystical, magical beings that are in the desert. So to think that they would have something like cards and never use them to try and tell the future or perform magic, I think is bizarre. I think it's stupid to think that. And if you have people from the West who are going to this mystical, magical land, why they would not pick up those tricks from the people in Egypt it's what do you go to Egypt, you're in a place where you can't communicate with your homeland, you don't know, you barely made it, you're starving, you're confused, you're hungry, you're in this bizarre place, and someone comes up to you and goes, I can tell you what's going to happen. You're going to get it done. So with cards going to a new place, cartomancy must have come with it. It just seems logical to me, especially in a time when a lot of these like pagan traditions and Wiccan and I don't even know the Fays, all these different magical traditions were very much alive in Europe. So why they wouldn't adopt such a practice from their Egyptian friends that are giving them this new tool. And then once it is made, having astrological and magical symbols built into it. It seems to me that the tarot has roots in Egypt. During the 1800s and 1900s, when a lot of these decks were first coming out, the mystery schools of the day were all tied to the Egyptian mystery schools. That's where they got the ideas of the mystery schools. The Golden Dawn was mostly based around the Egyptian mystery schools. Pamela Coleman Smith, who made the Rider-Waite Tarot deck, who painted the Rider-Waite Tarot deck, she was a member of the Golden Dawn and then later on the Fellowship of the Rosy Cross. The Fellowship of the Rosy Cross was more based around the Christian ideals, but they were a fractured sect of the Golden Dawn. So you can see in those decks the mixture of Egyptian mysticism and Christian mysticism. Tarot may not have come directly from Egypt, but its roots run deep into Egypt. And I think it's real cocky to just brush all that stuff off. I know that people just so badly want to be their tool to be of the Egyptian mystery school. And it's not, but in a way it is. Because through these traditions of awakening and magic and trying to find out what the future holds and what the past meant and what we can do with this magical, mystical experience that we've been given is in a way an extension of those mystery schools. And I think in a way it keeps those traditions alive. Egyptians were just like us. They were trying to figure stuff out. They thought magic was cool. Magic was helping them out. I'm sure they used every tool that they could to get to where they were trying to go. Y'all, I appreciate you sticking around. I appreciate you watching the video. If you want my stuff, then check me out at Bear.Of.Wands, at Bear.Of.Wands, Bear.Of.Wands on Facebook, Bear.Of.Wands on YouTube. Podcast, new episode down there. It's a really good one because I'm in it, which is awesome. Adventures in Tibetan, Life is But a Dream, Adventures in Tibetan Astrology in the Time of Penno. Real good stuff. Talisman's Astrology, Divination, hit me up. I'm the guy. I think I got an email link down there too. Love you guys. Love you guys. Say your mantra, take your vitamins, and stay grateful, y'all.